100 years ago tomorrow, the roots of democracy were allowed to spread. The Representation of the People Act gave women over 30 who met a property qualification and all men over the age of 21 the right to vote. And just months later, in December 1918, the first woman MP was elected.
In the grounds of Dublin Castle, the 26th Vienna Battalion falls in for a special parade after attending Mass at the Church of the Most Holy Trinity. Occasion for the ceremony is a nationwide tribute to the memory of Constance Markievicz, founder of the Fianna and fighter in the Easter Rising 34 years ago.
Constance Markievicz doesn't have the instant name recognition of Millicent Fawcett or Emmeline Pankhurst, but the Countess was a feminist and a passionate Irish nationalist. And she became the first woman to be returned to the Commons as an MP. As a member of Sinn Féin, she never took her seat.
Of her, it was often said, a friend of the toiler, a lover of the poor, a fighter for freedom.
Constance Markievicz was born into the Anglo-Irish Gore-Booth family and was briefly married to a Polish count. But why did this wealthy woman choose to follow the lead of Charles Parnell and champion Irish nationalism and workers' rights? Lindy Norton's written a biography of Constance Markievicz.
She grew up with her sister Eva, who's a notable poet, Eva Gore-Booth, her brother Jocelyn, who was one of the leaders of the cooperative movement in Ireland. And they really did try to create a better Ireland, if you like. If there was an underdog there, she'd be supporting it. You know, she supported the vote. That was her first big thing. She was very pro-workers' rights, and that stayed with her whole life. She was very much loved by the ordinary people of Dublin because they knew she was on their side.
The light of evening, Lissadell, great windows open to the south, two girls in silk kimonos, both beautiful, one a gazelle.
W.B. Yeats, another iconic Irish figure and an old friend of the family, was moved to describe Constance and her sister Eva's beauty in this poem. And although in Ireland Markievicz is revered for her passionate nationalism, a conviction that was to earn her arduous spells in jail, Yeats is withering about the sisters' political beliefs and the toll exacted on their looks.
But a raving autumn shears blossom from the summer's wreath. The older is condemned to death, pardoned, drags out lonely years conspiring among the ignorant. I know not what the younger dreams, some vague utopia, and she seems, when withered old and skeleton gaunt, an image of such politics.
Constance was in Holloway Prison at the time of her election to Westminster for her part in a plot against the British government. Biographer Lindy Norton.
She whooped and she hollered, and she was absolutely delighted to have been the first woman. There was 17 women stood for that election on the 14th of December, I think it was, and she was the only one elected. So, yes, it was hugely significant.
Later this month, Constance Markievicz's landmark election as an MP will be commemorated when the Speaker of the Irish Parliament presents a portrait to John Bercow to hang in the Gothic splendour of Westminster. Theresa May has expressed her support, which may have seemed a little odd to Constance herself, a Conservative British Prime Minister honouring an Irish nationalist and radical. Ivana Bacik is helping to organise Ireland's celebrations around the centenary of women's suffrage.
I think it's a sign of progress and of a different sort of relationship between Britain and Ireland in the last few decades. I think that means that we are able now to commemorate our history in a very different way than we might have been even 20 or 30 years ago. You know, it's fitting perhaps that we'll be presenting her portrait in a parliament where the government is led by a woman this year.
But do you have sympathy with unionists who might feel a little bit uncomfortable with this celebration of a woman who supported and espoused nationalism?
I think that things have moved on, and I think that unionists and nationalists alike from Northern Ireland will be joining with us in commemorating the centenary of women's suffrage. I would see this as an issue and a topic that I think it cuts across the lines of nationalism and unionism. I think we have moved on. I think 100 years on we can celebrate Markievicz for her role in fighting for women's suffrage.
So while many may welcome this belated recognition of Markievicz's role in women's suffrage, Lindy Norton thinks it's clear why Nancy Astor, the first woman to take her seat at Westminster, is so much better known.
History is written by the winners, isn't it? We forget now that women at the time had no rights. A person referred to a male person. We forget that women were absolutely second-class citizens. if that. And Nancy Astor, let's face it, had the English establishment behind her. Con was a rebel all her life, and the rebels don't always get the recognition they deserve. They do change the conversation in lots of ways, even if they're not getting into power.
Constance Markievicz may never have taken her place on the green benches of Westminster. She may have been reviled by the British authorities of the time, but she did play a crucial role in overturning the established view of women in politics. Thanks at least in part to her, women began the long scramble to win real power, and a century later, amid cries of Me Too, Time's Up and calls for equal pay, it's a journey which some might say is still far from complete.
Ordinary people who knew her just loved her, and to me, what better testament is there to anyone? When I started reading her prison letters, I thought, she's been so maligned, that she's so clearly a decent human being. And when I die, I hope somebody will say I'm a decent human being. I think that's the biggest tribute you can give to anyone.
A last word then from Constance Markievicz herself, putting a positive spin on one of her many spells in prison.
I have my health, and I can always find a way to give my dreams a living form. So I sit and dream, and build up a world of birds and butterflies and flowers from the sheen in a dewdrop or the flash of a seagull's wing. Everyone who has anything to do with me is considerate and kind, and the only bore is being locked up, where there is so much to be done.
That music was Down by the Sally Gardens. The words were by W.B. Yeats, sung by Andreas Scholl. And the W.B. Yeats poem in memory of Eva Gore Booth and Con Markievicz was read by the actor David Charles.